right, what's up? I got this wire that's bugging me, so just hold on a second and I'll be with you. All right. Wow. Do I look pretty enough? It's cool. It's good. All right, we're going to wrap this series up today called Simple, and I hope that you've been getting something out of it. I really do. For me, it just helps me breathe better. You know, just clearing out the clutter in my life, just getting rid of a bunch of stuff that I just carry around all the time. So it's just so good to like simplify and downsize and get everything that's just lighter. You know what I mean? Just pack lighter, and it feels good. Today I want to talk about teaching Jesus did. And I want to take it from a context of something that you might not be that familiar with. How many of you guys ever read the book of Ecclesiastes? Anybody ever read Ecclesiastes? And Celia says that Ecclesiastes is depressing. She said, man, it's horrible. Why would you read that? It's just so depressing. I'm like, you just don't get it. You don't get it. It's like, it's one of the most uplifting and encouraging books in the Bible. And I know you're like, man, that's weird, because it starts out like everything is meaningless. Like that's the way he starts. Like everything in there is meaningless. Everything is hopeless. You know, it's in, literally, verse 2 where he starts talking in Ecclesiastes is everything is meaningless. And like, I thought, you know, I used to live that way. Excuse me. Man, everything has gone wrong with my wireless stuff today. Like my guitar wireless just quit. Everything's gone wrong. So let me get hooked up here. All right. I'm back. We'll edit that out. It'll be fine. What was I talking about? Everything's meaningless. I used to live that way. What I found out as I was going through life was, man, I worked so hard at becoming somebody. I wanted to be somebody, and I wanted to have I wanted to have everything. And I worked and worked at it. And what I found was the more I got, the more discouraged I got. And the further along I should be, the more I started to say, man, this is not what I thought it was going to be. After you get out of high school, man, you have these huge dreams of ideas of who you're going to be and how things should go. And then like you start out and it's like going up, 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 man. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, is this really it? I mean, is this all there is to this? And so you quit that because you know that's not working. And you go try something else. Has anybody in here ever had more than 10 W-2s in a year? Man, I did my taxes once, and it took me longer to enter all the W-2s than it did to file my taxes. Because and maybe you guys are just way more resilient than I am, but like if something's not working for me, I'm pulling chalks. I'm done, man. I'm on something like if it's not working, I'm out. I'm like, I know this is going down, and I ain't going down with the ship. I'm not El Capitan. You know what I mean? So we move on and we move on, and then we look, it's like that's not working, so I'm going to try this other thing. And we go through all of these things, man. We go through these stages of growing up and becoming, and we'll try this school and that school, and we'll try this job and that job, and we'll try, you know, this party life and that party life, and then we'll try this relationship and that relationship, and like we'll get married because getting married's got to do it, and then we'll be like, I got to get unmarried, and then it's like, so we get rid of that marriage, and then we try another one, and it's like, no, that's not working, and then it's like 5, 6, 7, and you're like, I don't remember, was it my third or fourth wife? I can't remember, and then and we're trying that, and you're like, that's not working, and you're like, man, if we just had kids, that would be it, right? Because kids will solve all the problems. Dude, that is a lie. I've seen people that are actually having marriage troubles and they're like, man, maybe we just need to have a kid. It doesn't work, by the way. That's not the best idea. Like if you're already struggling, that's not the best way to improve things. And we try all these things and finally at some point we're like, man, it's meaningless. And what's really cool about Ecclesiastes is that the writer of Ecclesiastes is Solomon. Now this guy Solomon was given by God the opportunity to ask for anything, and God would grant it. And you know what Solomon asked for? Wisdom. Solomon wanted to be the wisest man, and the Bible says that he was the wisest man that ever lived. Solomon was also one of the richest men that ever lived. Like in today's wealth, we couldn't even measure how wealthy he was. Solomon also, I think, had more wives than anybody's ever had. So it makes you question the whole wisdom thing. Right? You at least have to question it. Like, that was a holy statement. The light shone down. So the point is, don't have a bunch of wives. No, that wasn't the point. I know I need to clear that up. So he says, not everybody gets when you're joking. So like, you ought to clear some things up. So that was not. I mean, I'm not saying you should have a bunch of wives, but that's not the point, right? I'm going to move on. I'm in and I just can't get out. And when I get in those situations, y'all ever get in those situations and you just keep talking? Because like, just shut up. Just end it right there. Walk away. Cut your losses. It's funny though that Solomon, he goes through that, and if you read through Ecclesiastes, basically this whole simple series, it can come out of the book of Ecclesiastes because you see these cycles in Ecclesiastes. He talks about doing this thing and it not finding that it has no meaning. And he talks about doing this other thing and he finds that it has no meaning. He talks about wealth and money and how then he comes to the conclusion that doesn't do it. And he talks about all of these things all through Ecclesiastes, and he realizes that none of these things make life what he's really looking for. And I mean, I'll just skim through some things that he says in here. Like, this is in chapter 5. He says, those who love money will never have enough. How absurd to think that wealth brings true happiness. This other place he says, enjoy what you have rather than desiring what you don't have. And then he goes on, he says this. He says, everything has already been decided. It was known long ago what each person would be, so there's no use in arguing with God about your destiny. This is why Celia says it's depressing. He goes on and he says, none of us can hold back our spirit from departing. None of us has that power to prevent the day of our death. There is no escaping that obligation. That seems true. And he just goes on, he says all these things over and over and over and over. And he concludes the book. He says this, my final conclusion is, fear God and obey his commandments, for this is the duty of every person. Earlier, after he goes, before he's talking about everything that has been is coming around, like there's nothing new under the sun. Have y'all heard that? Like there's nothing new under the sun. That's from Ecclesiastes. Like Solomon realizes that everything that was and everything that will be has been. And so life is just going on. And he goes so far as to say in this one place, like, you're going to live your whole life and the world's really not going to change that much. And you're going to die, and another generation's going to come, and it's going to be the same thing. And he's like all of our labors and the stuff we really think's important is really kind of futile. It's like we spend our lives running and pursuing things that are extremely insignificant when you look at the big picture of things. And so then he goes into that. Y'all remember the song, Everything Has a Season? There is a time for everything under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die. Remember that? If you got young kids, man, just Google it. It's like, it's an old hippie song. Anyway, right before it goes into that song, you know, turn, turn, turn. That's the song, turn, turn, turn. Right before he goes into that, he says this, and this is important. He says, so I decided that there is nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and find satisfaction in work. Like to be content with how things are in my life. Then I realized that this pleasure is from the hand of God, who can eat or enjoy anything apart from Him. God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to those who please Him. This is what the wisest man in the world concluded about all of this, like, melodrama, I would say. All of this that's going on, all of this hopelessness, all this is no meaning. And then he's like, so what I found is that no matter what I do, joy comes from God. And apart from Him, I just spend my whole life on this treadmill of endless cycles of ups and downs and endless cycles of pursuing what I'll never obtain. One time Jesus was teaching, and as Jesus was talking to people, He was being questioned by these religious people. And they were asking Him, how do I have this kind of life? This eternal type, perpetual type, this life that is lived without limits, life upon life, not a life that goes on forever, but a life that gives life, that gives life, that gives life. That was the question. And Jesus said, well, you have to obey the commandments of God. And that's what Solomon agreed, right? Like he agreed that the only way we can truly have life is if we obey the commandments of God. But see what happened as people lived and as people went through this time, man, there was these wills or ways that God gave people to live. You've seen the 10 Commandments, like you've seen the movie. You know, Moses goes up, gets the commandments, comes down, people party, and Moses breaks commandments. You know, God says, don't do that again. Here, let me give you some more. And I don't know if it went down exactly like that, but you know, you get the gist. And so there was all these commandments. But here's what's funny about commandments is people lose the point often. I give my daughters commandments all the time. You parents, you give commands? Do this. Don't do this. And do they listen? No. Do they come back later after the pain and say, no, they don't say, I'm glad you told me or I wish I would have listened. Here's what I get. Don't say I told you so, Dad. Like I don't have to because you just did. Because I knew I was right and you were wrong in the beginning. I told my daughters I know everything. You might as well just listen to me up front and save us all a bunch of hassles. So I give them commands, but sometimes these commands get manipulated, right? Anybody ever been a teenager? Couple of you? You remember having the rules? What do? You manipulate the rule, like we make the rules say what we need the rules to say. And how do we manipulate the rules? To benefit us. And that's what happened with religion. Over time, they took these will of God and manipulated and began to use God's very will, God's laws for personal gain. And that's called religion. When you introduce a godly idea and manipulate it into being able to control people and to manipulate people and for personal gain, That's religion. And that's not what God's about. God's never been about religion. God gave His law, His will, the same reason I give my kids my law. Not because I want to control and manipulate, but because I know what's best for them. I know what will hurt my kids. How do I know? Because I did it when my parents told me not to. And so we go generation after generation after generation manipulating and going around and sneaking around and going outside the will of our parents. And the same thing with God. And what happened over time, all of God's laws turned into religion. It was about control and manipulation and about personal gain. It became a very lucrative deal, God's law. Especially the people who were able to do it and then tell other people, like, if you can't do it to this standard, then you need to give a sin offering. Like, man, I'm glad those days are over. Are they? Are they really? I mean, how many of you guys have ever heard about paying penance? I mean, there's a lot to do with this idea of holding, manipulating, and controlling people. And it all sounds great. Like nobody would do this if it didn't sound great. And to me, it sounds like the religion that is the hardest to do has to be the holiest, right? I mean, the one that's the hardest, toughest, most difficult, that's got to be the one God likes the most because He really loves to see us suffer. That's why we worship Him, because He tries to make us suffer. That's not the way it was ever meant to be at all. God put His laws in place because He loved these people so much that He wanted them to have life without limits. And so as He gave them His law and He gave them His will, He did it with a purpose. If you'll do this, you'll live. And if you don't, you'll die. And I think back then it was pretty literal. Like, if you do this, you'll live. And if you don't, man, okay, you want to disobey my food laws? Go get you some shrimp without refrigeration and without cooking it and chaw down on that. And you'll either die or wish you were. You know what I mean? There was laws that were in place for a very specific reason, like washing. You know, you don't clean yourself, you get disease and the whole community dies. Wash yourselves. I mean, that's a good law, right? So those things are very important. And God, don't kill. That's probably a better way to live. Like, I mean, some of us think, you know, that's categorically a better way to live. Like, some people just need to die. That was a joke, too. God will get them. That's what else we say. God will get them. Don't take your neighbor's stuff. Like, that's not going to be good for a relationship because then you get killed. Right? Don't sleep with your neighbor's wife. Even better advice, because that'll get you killed faster. All right? Maybe. Around here, man, it's like, I don't care about that. Just don't steal my hunting buggy. You know what like, we'll deal with that other thing. We're grown-ups. But, you know, priorities, right? Jesus had gotten in such a mess, and all of a sudden Jesus comes up and He's like, obey God's commands. And they're like, which ones? And He says, let me make it simple. That's what I love about Jesus. He always takes the big picture and says, let me make it simple. Don't you wish that somebody would just take churchology and religion and make it simple? Like, did you ever feel the pressure of like, oh, man, there's so many rules and so much going on. How can I ever live for God? You know, how can I ever please God? And then I remember at this one time in my life, I was going so bad and so fast downhill. I thought, I'm so far gone. What the heck is the use of even trying anymore? That makes you dangerous. Because once you quit trying, man, it's game over. Anybody been there? Like, man, I've been so far down, it doesn't even matter anymore. Jesus comes all of a sudden and he says, let me make this simple for you. It's not as hard as you're making it. You guys are working way too hard, man, and these guys over here aren't right, and these guys over here, they're putting these heavy rules on you that God never put on you, and then you've got these taxes from Rome, and you've got this bondage and that bondage, and you are not able to live. And the question of the day was, how can I just live? And Jesus says, let me simplify it. If you love God with all of your heart. And if you will love your neighbor, then you will encapsulate everything you were created to be. You will live and live abundantly if you can just love God and love people around you. And we look at that, man, and we're like, okay, what are the greatest 2 commandments? Anybody? Anybody else? All right. Love God and love your neighbor, right? Everybody knows that. If you've been to church here any time at all, you know that's in the Bible, right? Greatest 2 commandments. Love God and love others. Love God and love others. But let me ask you this. When you go to make a decision in your life, what's your first consideration? Myself. The question how is this going to affect me? Right? Very first question, how is this going to affect me? Second question, how is this going to affect others? My family, my friends, people I'm fixing to jack over? No, I don't know how your decisions are going. They may be different than mine. I don't know. When do we ever stop and say, is this what God really, is this in the big picture of what God desires for me? Is He really at the front of our decision-making process? Is He at the front of the line in the priorities in our life? We get our paychecks and we're like, our first thought is, well, where did it all go? Right? Our first thought is, why is it so small? Our second thought, after we wake up and realize the government took half of it, is I've got to take care of my bills. Hopefully, that's one of your top questions. You know, I know people that's like, we'll get to that. Hopefully, you know, you're thinking about, okay, I got to pay my bills, and you're like, then it's like, what am I going to do with my money? Like, because, you know, bass boat, new guitar, whatever, man. We're thinking about, how can I please me and reign in my kingdom? But one of the last things we would consider, it's like, oh yeah, Sunday we get here and like, we'll throw a few dollars in the offering plate or whatever. But God gave a law that you should return your first tenth to Him. Tenth, tithe. You should return your first tenth to Him. And the reason is because God wanted us to learn to live with margins in our lives. Also, there is nothing that will tell you your priority more than where your money goes. You want to know what's really important to you? Look at your checkbook. Eating out's important to us, obviously, man. Obviously, the grocery store and eating out. It's priorities. Cars, I can tell you that, man. Look at our checkbook. You can see cars are a higher priority, man. We spend a lot of money on cars. Like, I don't like to look at it. I pretend it doesn't happen. Because if you pretend it doesn't happen, it's not real. We shifted this a long time ago. I was actually transformed, resurrected, changed. I was a whole new, different, completely different person. My life shifted to a place where God really ruled my life. For real, not just on Sunday and not just because we decided to go to church or whatever. It's like, we'll go to church today. It was like I really wanted to be part of God's kingdom. And when it happened, man, we started giving everything off the top, like our first fruits, our first tithe, our first tenth. And then everything else just kind of came under that. And that's always been a non-negotiable. It's not really a thought we give to anything. But we have established through the way we live that we love God, that we consider what God is saying to us in our decisions. We consider what God is saying to us and how important God is to us in our finances and in all parts of our lives. And since then, man, our lives, they just exploded. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable, the peace. It's different living when you don't always have to be looking over your shoulder for somebody you jacked last week. It's easier. It's easier. It's easier to live knowing you're not lying to everybody. It's easier. It's easier to live authentic. It's easier to live just as who you are. It's so much more peaceful in life to not be worried about my wife finding out I'm sleeping with somebody else. That would be stressful, I'm assuming. Our finances stabilized because instead of my 10 W-2s and the ups and downs and ins and outs and the just chaos of everything, man, it was like we learned margin and we learned that God always did provide every time. Now, not always for my wants. Like I tell God all the time, God, I know you're in charge. But I'd like $1 million, please. Because, I think it would make my life better. He hasn't given me that, so obviously it wouldn't. But there's nothing wrong with asking. I have a lot of things. Like, I have nice guitars, man, and I have nice cars. I have smoking hot wife. I have things. But you know what? The difference between me then and me today is those things don't rule my life. We've had so many things in our life that we wanted so bad and God gave us and then asked us what we were going to do with it. Whew. We had this house Celia wanted since she was a little kid, man. This is her great-grandmother's house. And we got it, and it was, man, this house was ate up with termites. And I mean ate up, like when we pulled the sheetrock off, like that's what was holding the roof up. Y'all ever seen wood that was just shaved pieces of paper? That's what the studs were in this house. Like there wasn't enough stud to hold the nails. When we pulled the sheetrock, the nails fell to the ground. So we have this house, poles under there, man. It's being held up, just held up. The roof is being held up by every brace we can put in the thing. And so we got the whole thing, just gut it, build it all back, and it's built to her specs. It's perfect. Dream house. We had 20 acres. We had a horse. Her dream, not mine. Her dream, my nightmare. I have this theory, you never get on anything that has a brain of its own. That's stupid. Why you would ride anything with its own mind? I don't know why you'd do that. But we had it all. And all of a sudden, man, it's like I said, man, I really feel like we're supposed to be doing youth ministry full time. Then the youth ministry that calls and asks us to come serve was in West Texas, which that is the desert, by the way. What are you going to do? We sold a house that we had just finished. And I'm not just talking about that she had always wanted to. I'm talking about blood, sweat, tears. It was killer. Like, it would have been easier to dynamite the thing and build it back. If you ever remodel a house, it's just easier to go from scratch. And we sold that thing, and we went to West Texas. And you know how long we were in West Texas before God shifted us to starting a church? 4 months. We sold a house for 4 months. And we went there, our intention was that we were going to be there forever. And we sold it because God wanted us to be a youth ministry. Fast forward a little bit though, and there was this hill beside Celia's mom's house, beautiful hilltop, just coastal, beautiful. Like, it is like when you envision building a house in the country on a hilltop, that was the place. Celia's family didn't own that property. Didn't own it at all the whole time she's growing up. But she always wanted to build a house on that hilltop. And what happened through events is her dad ended up getting that place. And not only did he get it, he got it and gave it to her. Her dream place, we didn't buy it. It was given to her. Then me and my dad built the house that we have always wanted on top of that hill, right where she had always dreamed of. But you know what? If God says, move on, sell that one, guess what happens to that one? You know why? Because it's just a house in the end. What's more important is that we live our lives right in the middle of where God wants us at any time in our lives. And sometimes we don't always see things that are coming. We consider losses to be these great catastrophes in our life when all losses seem to be is letting go of what was so you can move into what is. That's what life looks like when you love God. When you love God. When He's the priority of your life. And that is the better way to live. Everything else in life just seems meaningless. Whether you have or whether you don't doesn't matter when you love God. When God is third or fourth or fifth or 10th priority, man, you will live and die over your stuff. Over your house, over your car. Oh, I wrecked my car. I totaled my car. I lost my whatever. I lost my job. I can't pay for my stuff. Wham. Let me tell you this. Credit comes and goes. I've been broke, busted, bankrupt. Like Justice said, I've been back on top. She got her iPhone 6. I said, how do you like it? She said, I'm back on top again. It's like a phone, man. I got back on top. That's all it took. If I'd only known, phone will do it. If you want to get back on top, iPhone 6. All there is to it. It's just stuff, though. It comes and goes. The problem is if that becomes your priority, if you start to love the things of this world more than that, and that stuff is nothing more than being about you. When do we question what God wants? What will affect those around us? When do we demote ourselves in our kingdom? Because Jesus says, if you want life, make it simple. Forget the rules. Forget trying so hard with religion. Make God the king of your life. And I mean for real, not Sunday, not just showing up, not like, oh man, I love God, yeah, check, Jesus. I mean, God check, others check. Yeah, now let's get down to what real life's about. It's not a checklist. It's just the truth on how to live your life. Do you love God more than anything else? Do you put others ahead of yourself? That's where we find life. That's how to keep it simple. And when you live like that, you can live light, because stuff will come and stuff will go. Here's why I love the way Job says it. Lord gives, Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I love the last verse of Job is my favorite. Like if you've read Job, man, it's intense, right, the whole time. It's like, oh my gosh, you put yourself in the story. You ever do that? And you're like, how is he bearing with this? These friends of his, who are these friends? And then at the end, like Job has lost his family, he's lost his fortunes, he's lost his wife, his kids, he's lost everything. I don't think he lost his wife. I lied right here. He lost his kids, he lost his cows, he lost his fortune, he lost his homes, he lost everything. He was on bottom. And he comes out, and God restores it all 7 times over. And what he says at the very last statement Job makes, before I knew about God, now I know him. Now I know him. Sometimes losing those things are blessings. Sometimes losing those things is where we come to know God. And if you don't know him, it can never be priority, right? You can know about him, but you're never going to make anything priority in your life that you just know about. It's got to be personal. You got to trust it. All right, you guys stand up with me. I want to pray for you.
She said